Alright everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be adding a few more details to our scene. We're going to be adding in some presents, some ornaments, making our snow look a little bit better, and maybe even putting on a hat and scarf on our snowman. Before we get into that, we probably need to address this snowman. So if you notice when we placed our trees, I could just grab the tree, I could move it around and the leaves went with it. Same thing for the rocks. That snow moves with it. That's because the leaves and the snow are parented to these rocks and this tree. That's not true for our snowman. Right now, our snowman is just a bunch of individual objects. So if I move it around, it'll all fall apart. So I can't really reposition this in the scene. That's a pretty easy fix. All I need to do is select my components. So I'll go ahead and click on this rock. If I hold down Shift, I can keep selecting items. Let's go ahead and grab everything, including the arms. And finally, I'll select the base. Now you'll notice, if I zoom in a little bit, it's a little hard to see, but everything has this orange outline except for the last object I selected, which has a little bit of a lighter orange or yellow tint to it. This yellow indicates that this is my active object, and this is the object that I want to parent all these other items to. So now that I have everything selected, I simply hit Control P, and then I can parent to object. Now you can see these little dashed lines, and they are pointing to the center of this object. They're showing where they're parented to. These are called child objects, and this is the parent, which means they're going to follow along with my parent object. So if I go and move my parent object, now everything moves along with it. Oh, and you can see I forgot the nose. That's okay. We'll just select the nose, Shift, left click on that, Control P, and parent to object. Now I can move my snowman around in the scene. Maybe I move him over, make a nice little thumbnail. I'm going to go ahead and start turning off a few things in my scene, and let's go ahead and make some presents. I want you to know something. Now that I've turned everything off except the snowman, you can notice that all I have left is this big cube. And I don't have any of these other components. If you remember earlier, if you click on a component and you come over here and hit period or full stop on the number pad, it'll go ahead and open that. Now that we've parented these to this bottom cube here, they're all going to sit underneath it. And that's because these are the children. So if you're looking around in here and you can't find it, it'll be under here. All right, let's make some presents. I'm just going to add in Shift A, go ahead and add in a cube. Now this is going to be a huge present, but that's okay. Let's shrink it down, maybe scale it on the Y. We'll make it a box. This is pretty easy. All I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to hit Control R, add in a loop cut. I'm going to add in a loop cut that way. Left click to place it, and then I'm just going to slide it up here. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit 2 so that I'm in edge select mode. Sorry, I'm going to go into 3 up here, face select. And then if I hold Alt and left click, I can grab this whole loop. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit E to extrude. I don't want to extrude up or down. I want to extrude out. So I'm going to hit S to scale. And then I'll probably hold Shift so I can do it slowly and just put a little bit of a top on that box. All right. Now I want this to be a couple different materials. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put in a few loop cuts so I can make a ribbon going around the box. Put one there, put one next to it, Control R, put in another loop cut, Control R, put one after that, and I'm going to leave it like that. Now let's go ahead and hit A and add in a material. If I go down to my material tab, I can assign something. Let's put in a new material. Maybe we'll just call this black, and then I'll bring this down so it's black. But I also want some shiny ribbon going around it, so maybe I'll add in a second color. So if I need a second color, I can hit this plus here. This will just make a new slot. Now I have a second slot for material, and I hit new. And now there's a new material in that slot. Let's call this red. Actually, let's call this metallic red. Now, if I want this metallic, we'll turn the roughness all the way down. We'll turn metallic all the way up. Let's go ahead and make it red. Right now, you can see it hasn't done anything. That's because we assigned this black material to the whole package. If we want to select certain faces and apply this color to them, we can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and be in my face select again. I'm going to hold Alt, left click to grab that loop. And if I hold Shift and do Alt, left click, I can grab a second loop. And now I have this metallic red highlighted. I'm going to click Assign. And now I have added some metallic coloring in. Let's go ahead and see this in cycles. I'm going to go ahead and jump into object mode real quick so we can see it. That's pretty nice. I might go back to this black material and just bring up the roughness. Oh, maybe bring it down. Bring down the roughness. There we go. Now it's a little bit glossy like wrapping paper. And I might change this red to a darker red. All right. I'm going to go back into edit mode. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a few cylinders on top to make it look like a bow. The difference between adding an object in object mode and adding it in edit mode is if we add it into edit mode, it becomes part of this object. Let's go ahead and add something in. I'm going to hit Shift A. Let's go ahead and do a cylinder. I'm going to shrink that down, move it up. We'll shrink it down even more, maybe something like that. I'm going to bring that down, and then I'm going to rotate 90. That looks pretty good to me. I'm going to scale it on the Z, flatten it maybe scale a little bit bigger. Bring it down and Shift D to duplicate it and rotate it on the Z, and we'll do one of those. Now let me show you what I mean that these are a single object. If I go back to object mode and I grab this, you can see it travels along with the package. If I had done this in object mode, these are separate objects. But since I did in edit mode, this counts as part of the same mesh. It's a joined object. Let's go back into edit. They're in the same mesh group, but I can select them individually. What I can do for that is if I left click on one and need to move it, I can hit L, and that'll select everything connected to this one. I can move that around. If I do it on the package, you can see it selects the whole package. Because these meshes aren't actually joined, they're just kind of in the same group. All right, so let's go ahead and left click on our bow here. I'll hit L. I will shift left click on this one. I will hit L. And then I will go to this red metallic and I will assign that material to them. All right, we have a package, and I might just right click on this to do shade smooth. There we go. Now we have a nice present, but I want some variations. So let's go ahead and make a few more. I'll bring this up, Shift D, maybe bring it down. I'll go on this black, and maybe I'll hit this 2 here to make a duplicate of the black. Let's make this white. And then I will just change this to white. Pretty simple. Maybe I'll go on this metallic red too, and I'll change this. I'll make a duplicate of that, and we'll do metallic green. And then we can just change this to green. Maybe not that kind of green, a dark green. There we go. Let's make another one. Go ahead and make this metallic blue. And maybe I'll just make this one red. All right, now we have a bunch of cool presents. Let's go ahead and make some ornaments. Now, ornaments are going to be really easy because we've already done the hard work. I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to add in a UV sphere. Let's just move that up, and we'll scale it to like 0.1. Shift D, make a few of them. Go ahead and shade smooth all of these. And then I will just click on one, go here, and I will use the metallic colors to make these nice bulbs. All right, cool. Now we have some Christmas ornaments. Let's go ahead and turn back on our tree, and maybe I'll turn back on our landscape. Turn everything back on, and we will move some of this stuff around. The easiest way to place this stuff is to use our views on our number pad. I'm going to go to 7 to do a top view, and I will move this here, maybe make a duplicate, move it over there, move this. You know what? I'll go into EV mode so it's a little bit easier to see. And then I can do a front view. Maybe turn off this plane for a second, and then I can just bring it down. Actually, I'm going to disable grabbing these leaves. So I'll go to my filter, grab the little arrow, and it's these leaves, so I'm going to uncheck that. Now I can't grab the leaves. Let's do that with the tree too. There we go. Now I can grab my bulbs. Let's go ahead and bring those down. One over there. Let's see what it's looking like. I'm not going to worry about adding in the little hooks or anything because these are really small. Let's see what it looks like there. All right, so we could put it on the X and maybe move it in and out. Green one is hidden in the back, so I'm going to go ahead and move it. All right, excellent. Now we have ornaments, we have some presents. Let me show you a trick you can do with the presents. We can actually randomize these presents a little bit more. And for that, we're going to use yet another add-on. So edit, preferences, add-on, and this one's going to be called scatter. Go ahead and turn it on. And the way this works is we're going to select what we want to scatter first, and then we're going to select our scatter surface. So our active object will be last. So we'll grab our presents, shift click, and then shift click this ground here. So now this is our active object. It's got the light orange yellow border. If I go up to object, I can go down to scatter objects. And what that's going to do is just going to let me paint where I want these objects to be. So I can just left click, paint around the tree. And it's going to give me like a small little preview of where stuff's going to be. That's pretty nice. If I come over here under this tool icon here, I have some more options that I can use. Here's my density. So maybe that's too many. I can bring it back. I can bring down the radius so they're not as far away. And maybe the randomness a little bit. This will be size, rotation, offset it. I don't think I'm going to offset that. That looks pretty good. Maybe the density down a little bit more. We don't need too many presents. And I can go with that, and then I can just enter. And I have presents scattered around my tree. If I click on them, sometimes some of them come in groups. You can see they're all like instances grouped in the colors. They're a little bit small, so I'm just going to go ahead and place them again real quick. You should also know that once I have placed these objects, none of these options work anymore. I'll have to redo it. There we go. What I can do is I can just place these or hide these, move them out of the way. I might just grab all 3 of them, put them in a new collection, and then turn that collection off. All right, and now you have some presents scattered around the tree. Of course, you can always place them and duplicate them by hand if you want, and you can always just get rid of them if you don't need them. But that's a nice quick way to scatter stuff around and make it look real nice. All right, now we can turn our attention toward the snowman. And we're going to add in maybe a scarf and a hat. But before we do that, let's go ahead and change our snow and make our snow look better. Said we were going to do that, so let's go ahead and do that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on this base model here. Let's go ahead and see our snow options. And I'm just going to choose white, because I don't want to change the snow. There's a lot of nodes that I don't need in that shader. I'm going to choose white, make a duplicate of that, and maybe just call this created snow. Let's go ahead and go over to our shading tab. What we're going to do for our snow is a little bit like what we did with the bark, but instead of mixing colors, we're going to be mixing displacement. So we're going to have a big displacement that's going to push the snow out, and then we're going to have like little snowflake speckles, a little bit of displacement on top of that. So to do that, we need our noise textures. So just like we did with our color, we're going to use noise textures to do this. So Shift A, noise. Drop that down, go ahead and duplicate it because we need 2 of them. And then I'm going to go ahead and just move them down here. Since we have Node Wrangler enabled, I'm going to click on one of these noise textures, and then I'm going to hit Control T. That's going to bring up our texture coordinates and mapping. And I can just go ahead and plug both of those in. And then we're going to go out through this displacement. So there's 2 things we need to do to be able to see this. The first is to go into cycles because it will not display in Eevee. So go to cycles. The other thing is when we are on our material here, we need to go down under settings and change from bump only to displacement and bump. Now bump is what we use for the bark, but instead of actually just faking the displacement that we have for the bark, we're actually going to displace this mesh here. So we have our displacement, and just like the bump, we need to put down a displacement node, Shift A, displacement, and then we can go ahead and hook that in to view it. Now, it shoved it off to the side. Part of the problem here is I'm plugged in the wrong spot. I need to be here on height. And now this displacement is going to push it out from the center. If I don't have this displacement, you can see it's just going to shoot off to the side here. So we need to go through our displacement to accurately do this. And it's not displaying quite correctly. It looks different, but it's not quite right. If you remember when we did our render settings, we changed this to experimental. And experimental is going to allow us to use a cool little feature of our modifier here, and that's adaptive subdivision. We have our subsurf modifier here that's making our snowball, but we can do adaptive to view this displacement. So now you can see it's building up the snow. This is a little intense. I might turn that down. We'll go to 1 or 2, somewhere between 1 and 2. That looks nice. And we're going to put maybe more toward 1. And we're going to put our small displacement on top of that. So let's duplicate this node, height, and let's do our small displacement. Our small displacement are going to be between 80 and 100, somewhere in there. But it's displacing a little too much, so I'm going to make the scale a lot smaller. Let's try 0.1. That's pretty nice. That might be a little too big still. So 0.05. So now we have our small displacement. We're going to put it on top of our big displacement. So we need to mix these 2. Now for color, we used a color ramp to do that. We're going to use something similar. These are vectors, and we could use a vector math, but I'm going to use a different method. I'm actually going to use a mixed color for this. This is a slimmed down version of a tutorial by Kaizen. I'll leave a link in the description for that one if you want to go super in depth, but what we have right here will be plenty for what we have going on. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift A. Let's search for a mix color. So now I'm going to use this mix color, and I'm going to go to add. Could just use a vector math and add it that way, but I want to use this method because it has a slider. Let's go ahead and plug in our 2 displacements, and then the result coming out, look at that. So we have our large displacement, and on top of that, we have this little displacement here. Now I might turn the scale up. Let's go back to 0.1. There are lots of different things we can do with this. One thing I may want to change on this is we're using generated right now. I might just go to object. That'll use the origin of this object to displace. Ooh, that gives us some pretty nice detail there. Let's go ahead and turn this scale down. something like that. Just play with it until you get something that you like. It's just going to be iterative between this scale and this scale here. So now we have a snow texture that's actually going to be warping our snowball there. Now you might notice there's some weird shadows going on. You could either turn up this dicing scale, that's an option, or you could play with these other parameters like the scale until it's a little less jagged. And then we have our factor here, so we can slide around and get different values of what we want. So here's our old snow, here's our new snow, and you can use whatever you like. This looks a little bit more natural because of the displacement. And just remember to fix your buttons or anything else that might be hidden when you do this. Again, if you go back to Eevee, it won't be on. This is only a cycles displacement. Okay, so let's go over to our rock. And I just want to make a few changes to it, just like we did with Snowman. I'm not going to use the displacement, but I am going to use the bump. So let's go ahead and add in a bump. Go ahead and plug that in. Now what I want to do with this is I want to combine a couple different noise textures. Blender has all sorts of them. I'm going to use a Musgrave, then I'm going to use a Voronoi. And I'm going to mix between the two. So I'm going to go ahead and use that color mix again. Go ahead and put those in, and then that can go into my height. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on these just so we can see what we're doing. Musgrave is kind of this pattern texture. I like to think of it as big spots on like a cow or something. Voronoi is going to be little dots. I want to increase this. These are going to be like little pumice holes. So I'm going to change this to maybe 50, somewhere around there, 40 to 50. And here, I'm not going to change it too much, but I am going to increase it to maybe 20. Now when you look on this, we get this nice texture. It's kind of rocky, a little bit jagged. It's not too over the top, but it adds a little bit more dimension to it. Just for reference, take that out. That's what we had before. All right, and then one last thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to go ahead and change the coordinates with this. Again, I'm going to click on this, hit Control T, and I'm just going to stick with generated. And this doesn't change it too much, but the nice thing I can do with this, if I want to add in some extra dimension to this, is I could put in a noise into this and change the patterning quite a bit. So we're to put something there, start to get swirls. See a swirling pattern there. I went with Voronoi. It's almost like cracked ground. So if you want to, feel free to play with that and just hit Shift A, look for texture. You have all these textures you could use. Throw in a brick. So you can make it pretty interesting just by changing the coordinate system. Let's leave it like that. That's looking pretty good. We have a much better looking rock there. We have better looking snow. Let's go ahead and give this guy a hat. So go back to layout, and we're going to do something similar like we did with the present. I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift A, and I'm going to go ahead and add in cylinder. Bring that cylinder up, shrink it down, put it somewhere on top of his head. Let's see if we can get that in the right spot. Maybe an overhead view, center it. All right, go ahead and right click and shade smooth. Tab into edit, Control R, add in a loop cut. I'm going to add in one down here. Go ahead and grab the faces, Alt left click. Might have to click a few times, get that. Extrude, just like we did the gift, and then scale. And there we have our top hat. I'm going to do a few more things. I'm going to go ahead and do what we did on the presents. I'm going to add in a little band here. Let's go ahead and add a material. We'll add black. Might go into cycles just to see what this looks like. I will probably change this and make it a little bit more interesting. But for now, let's just leave it black. I'm going to go ahead and grab this section here, add in another material, and we will use the metallic red and a sign. Now, a few other things I might want to do. We haven't done anything with proportional editing yet, but let's go ahead and do that. Up here we have proportional editing, and I'm going to use that to deform this hat. It looks too perfect, so let's go ahead and deform it. So with proportional editing on, I can use connected only. Sometimes that's good if I have several objects, like the ribbon in the present. Everything's connected here, so it doesn't matter if I have it on or not. But we can go ahead and go with this. We'll go ahead and grab something, hit G, brings up a circle. Use my scroll wheel to bring it down, and then G, and I will only do this affected area, and we will maybe rotate it here, bring it down, maybe grab this side, and grab the edges. Maybe I'll just grab these edges, G, and now we have our hat, which is a little worn. Now let's go ahead and grab this black. Let's make it something different. Call it hat. And let's go ahead and bring up the roughness. That'll look all right for now. bring this hat maybe down just a little bit. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to make a few adjustments to this hat. One thing I like to do, and we're going to do something similar with this scarf, is I like to use a magic texture to give this a bit of a cloth look. So let's go ahead and hit Shift A. We'll look for magic texture. Again, we'll probably want to use the bump. Go ahead and plug in our bump color into a height, and then we can start increasing this scale. See, when we get down there, it starts looking like it's woven. Oh, looks pretty nice. I might put up the metallic a little bit just to darken this. Oh, and shade smooth. I don't know that I put on shade smooth. Now when we're looking at this, it's looking a lot more interesting. This top is looking a little big, so I'm going to go ahead and grab all of that. And one thing you can do is if you need to slide something closer together, you can hit G twice. Let's turn off proportional editing, G twice, and I can just slide it down, and it'll just slide down closer together. Just move this around a little bit so we can get rid of that snow. Excellent. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you is how to make a scarf on this guy. And for that, I'm going to use a circle. So Shift A, let's go into add in a mesh circle, bring this up, and maybe I'll just go to top view, bring this over, place it right there, make sure it's around the head, and we will scale this in. And it doesn't matter if you're top or bottom, I'm going to go to edit mode. I'm going to hit E to extrude, and in this case, I'm going to extrude up. If you're up to your top, you can always extrude down, and I'm going to leave this for now. I will make adjustments. Let's go ahead and grab one of these faces, hit X, and delete the face. Then I'm going to go ahead and grab an edge. I'm going to extrude out maybe 4 times. Now I'm going to turn on my snapping. We haven't used snapping much, but now we're going to use it in edit mode. So there's a few more settings we should be aware of. I don't really need to do that. I do need to include this non-edited. And the main reason for that is so it'll stick to the surface a little bit better. Let's go ahead and make sure, yep, it is sticking to the surface. If I don't have that on, I might end up shooting through. Be aware of that. Make sure that you have that on. So we're going to go ahead and rotate some stuff around here. Rotate this, bring it down, bring this down, rotate. And ideally, I'm going to make this one flat. And we're just going to add in a little bit of rotation so that transition is a little bit smoother. It's getting a little crazy, so if I back off a little bit, rotate it like that, that'll do a little bit better. This one, we need to do the same. Maybe I'll just start rotating it, and I'll do E to extrude, rotate, E to extrude, rotate, E to extrude. Now I'm going to turn off snapping, and I'm going to go in here. I'm just going to grab these, and from a bit of a side view, just start pulling them off the snow. We're going to want some decent distance between this and the surface, because remember, we're working in Eevee, and if I go over to cycles, it's even more distorted, or it can be. So I just want to make sure I have enough room there. So bring this up, and make sure one's on top of the other. All right, that's not looking too bad. And if you want to, you can always make the scarf bigger. It's completely up to you. And I grab the whole thing and I just hit S and I scale it. That would be fine. Let's see how it looks like in cycles. Let's get some color on this so we can see it. I'm gonna go right click, shade smooth, make sure that's on. Let's go over to our shading tab. Let's add in a new material, new, we'll call this scarf. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to make a checker pattern on it, and I'm going to displace it a bit. So I'm going to use 2 different noise textures to do this. I'm going to go ahead and use the checker texture for my color, and I'm going to use that same magic texture for making this look cloth-like. So let's go ahead and plug this into base color. Let's go ahead and add in that bump, and I'm going to go ahead and click on one of these, hit Control T to add my mapping. And in this case, I'm going to want to use the UV coordinates. You can see that this pattern doesn't follow nicely along, and I'm not going to get anything better if I go to Object. It still doesn't look very good. Let's go ahead and remove this bump for a moment. So I want this pattern to be nice, so I'm going to have to make my own UV coordinates. So UV can get complicated. We're going to make it really, really easy. See, there's nothing in here right now because we haven't done UV. So let's go to UV editing. We're just going to hit A on this. We don't need to make any seams or anything because this is just a single straight piece. And I'm going to hit U, And there's option to unwrap, and I'm just going to unwrap it. And here's our scarf. Now it curves. I don't really want it to curve. It's curved here, but I need it to go straight, because if we were to lay this out on a table, it would be straight. So I'm going to grab that, just hit S to scale, G to move it over, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to straighten this. The easiest way to do that is to hit 1, make sure we're grabbing vertices, same controls as we'd use in edit mode. Grab some vertices, right click, align horizontally. Let's do it with the top 2, align horizontally. Make sure we line vertically. Grab this side here, align vertically. Okay, so now this is square. I'm going to switch to 3, hit A, and then shift click this one. So this is our active. Make sure this is our active, and everything is selected by hitting A. And since this is our active, I can right click and go to follow active quads. And it snapped everything straight. Perfect. Now I can scale this up if I need to and just fit it somewhere in this window. Back to my shading editor. Now I can see this pattern and I can shrink it. So let's go ahead and scale this up. And now you see it's following that curve because it was laid out like a straight object. So now we get that nice pattern. Let's go ahead and change it. Maybe make it some Christmas colors, maybe a dark red and maybe a dark green. See what that looks like. It's not too bad. Let's go ahead and put back in our bump. That's looking like wrapping paper. Turn up our roughness, and then we can increase this scale. Just like we did with our hat, turn this scale up, and we can even change this pattern a little bit. I think somewhere around 5 and 6 on our depth gives it a nice weave look. So we have our pattern here. We could do a few more things to make this look good. In fact, let's go ahead and just add in some modifiers. This looks a little bit low poly right now, you can tell. So let's go ahead and add in a modifier, generate subsurf. And subsurf, you know, adds in that detail. So now it's nice and smooth, but also rounds things. That's a problem. To fix that, we just go in and like I showed you before, you can add in a loop cut, and then as closer these get together, the flatter they get. So we'll just add a loop cut there, a loop cut here, and that'll straighten those out. We can also do something else. We can go ahead and add in a solidify. And what a solidify does is it just adds thickness to it. It's like extruding a face out. It'll do over the whole thing. So let's go ahead and look at that. You can see it's extruded it out. Now it's going the wrong way. It's going in. So I'll just change that offset to go out. And one thing we might want to do, which we haven't done before, is you'll notice this thickness is in meters, and this we don't really know the scale. If I bring out my hit N and bring out my menu, this is our scale. Instead of a scale of 1, it's like a quarter of what it was because we shrunk it down. Some modifiers like solidify and bevel will really have trouble working correctly unless you apply the scale and change it. We want to say this is the correct size, so we want to change it to 1. So I'm going to hit Control A with it selected, and here we have apply. I'm going to apply scale. Now you can see it's much thicker. It's probably about 4 times as thick because now we have applied that scale and now it's a scale of 1, and that'll work correctly. Feel free to mess with this scarf some more, maybe even look at these different textures, maybe a brick or a gradient. Make your own scarf. Have some fun with it and add in some extra detail using the techniques that we've used. Thank you for watching. Please do some dabbling of your own, and we'll see you in the next video.